If you take away the teams that he played for, if you strip it down to brass tacks and you just focus on the player, the physicality and the skill and the way they combined together in that specific play style that he had, Romelu Lukaku is one of my favorite strikers ever. The speed, the strength, the skill, all mended into one in the hold-up play, in the dribbling, right? All put together. Few players have had all those skills, and even fewer have put it all together in just that unique blend, in the way the play style he had. And that's what makes him the most frustrating player ever, because we use the words wasted talent a lot. We use it on guys who had the ability to get to the top of the mountain but didn't for whatever circumstance. We use it for guys who got to the top of the mountain for a short period of time and then injuries brought them down, right? But he is unique in that he did get to the top of the mountain. He went through the trials and tribulations. He went through the obstacles that should have derailed him earlier in his career, and he got to the top of the mountain. He was at the peak, at the summit. He looked down upon everybody. And through his own actions, off the pitch, he himself took every step down the mountain. Nobody made him do it, right? There wasn't injuries. There were outside circumstances. He himself decided, I'm going to take every wrong step and go all the way down. I think to really appreciate the full arc of his career, you have to go all the way to the start. Because I feel like it's been forgotten how, and I know we throw this term around a lot now, but he was generational. I really believe that. He was a generational talent. At age 16, he makes his Anderlecht debut, and in his age 16 season, take a second to think about what you were doing at age 16. At age 16, he was the Belgian League top scorer and champion. At age 16, he was the Belgian League top scorer and champion. I cannot emphasize that enough. Of course, the Belgian golden generation gets talked about a lot now that we're, towards the twilight of it, right? But he, more than any other player, defined the beginning of it. There was more excitement around him than Eden Hazard, than Kevin De Bruyne, than all the others that have possibly surpassed him, in association with that golden generation. But he, age 16, making his Belgium debut, he was the beginning of the Belgian golden generation. And I don't think there's anything that summarizes his combination of physicality and skill at such a young age than his first goals for Belgium. From day one, he is bigger, faster, stronger, and more skilled than everybody at his age bracket. And it came with a lot of stereotypes that followed him for the rest of the career. He gets his move to Chelsea in 11-12, the season that they win the Champions League, and he doesn't play much. He starts one game that season, and he was man of the match against Blackburn. He gets his loan to West Brom, and that's like most people's introduction to Romelu Lukaku that season. His coming out party was the 5-5 draw against United, I think, in the last game of the season. He scores a hat-trick, a perfect hat-trick, header, left foot, right foot. It just showed how far ahead of his age he was at that point. He finishes with 17 Premier League goals, the highest scoring tally of any West Brom player ever in the Premier League. And I think there's now this stigma about him that, he couldn't cut it in the Premier League. He didn't do this in the Premier League. He didn't do that. From just a very, very early review of his career shows you how dumb that is. This dude was dominant in the Premier League from day one. From day one, he was breaking records. After West Brom, he goes on loan again at Everton. He's 15 goals, 7 assists. The talent is so clear. Again, probably his second signature game in the Premier League against Arsenal, where Roberto Martinez plays him on the right wing, and he just absolutely dominates Monreal. Physically and skill-wise, he just absolutely dominates him. He ends up at Everton permanently for another 3 seasons, and it culminates in a 25-goal Premier League season, right? And with that came the interest of the 2 biggest buyers that summer, United and Chelsea. And he was in competition with Alvaro Morata, the other big striker that was available that summer, right? Obviously, I think everybody's seen it now, the Mina Rizuki clip. That has become infamous for what she said about the 2 players. I'll just read her own words. If you offered me the choice between Morata and Lukaku, I wouldn't even think about it. I would pay 20-30 million more if I had to, and I would bring in Morata. but that's always because I will always prefer an intelligent player on my team. Those are exact words. And it's a sentiment that, like I said, followed him from the very beginning at Anderlecht all the way throughout his career. It's never stopped and it probably never will stop. But through the eyes of some people, he just couldn't, no matter how many goals he scored, no matter how much success he had at different clubs at this stage of his career, right? He could never shake some people's opinion of him that he was just fast and strong, and that was it. The market, though, didn't agree with Minazuki. Conte at Chelsea wanted him bad, but United wanted him even more. They pushed more to the middle of the table. They gave Everton everything they wanted, and they signed him. The United move didn't work. Like a lot of big talent and big money signings at United at the time, the environment just wasn't right. He scored 16 goals in his first season, but by his second season, it had just fizzled out. His physique had just changed a lot. He just looked bulky, too bulky. Very different from the sleek, thinner Lukaku that was at Everton. He came out and said that he felt he wasn't protected by the club, that during the speculation about his future, the club never came out and backed him, and that fueled even more speculation in his eyes. And at that point, he agreed that he needed a change of scenery. And he found it in the arms of the man who wanted him once upon a time, Antonio Conte again, this time at Inter. He gets a 75 million move. Record transfer for Inter Milan. I feel like people nowadays kind of don't realize how expensive that move was, how trend-setting that move was. It's double Inter's second highest transfer. But at Inter, he found the right guy. In Antonio Conte, he found the guy who was actually going to push him to the limits and push his game in the direction where it can be maximized, right? He's quoted as saying that for 3 months, all Conte had him do is hold-up drills. Hold-up drills, he picked out Andrea Ranocchia, told him get behind him and get the ball off him. Time and time and time and time again. And every time Lukaku lost the ball, they just did it again. They ran the drill over and over and over, just working up on his hold-up game non-stop. He put him on an intense diet to improve his physique, right? And it showed immediately. 23 goals in his first season. But this is the thing with him. He always had a clumsy streak. He always had these clips that everybody loved to make fun of. A bad touch here, he'd slip over the ball there. He was skilled, but he was always somehow in the wrong place at the wrong time for a clumsy little clip, right? And that season, in the Europa League final, he scores the own goal to lose them the game. 2 pictures that were just constantly echoed at that time. Even though he had scored 23 goals, even though he had delivered in his first season at Inter, that clumsy streak still was rooted in his public perception. That summer, Inter signed Achraf Hakimi. And I mentioned him specifically because I felt like he was the missing piece, the final piece of the puzzle in unlocking the full capacity of Lukaku's game, right? With Hakimi on the right, with Barella behind him in midfield, and with Lautaro beside him in attack, the full extent of his hold-up play was unleashed. He goes from 2 assists his first season at Inter to 11 assists. His back-to-goal game was unstoppable. Nobody could handle it. To use an American adage, he was too strong for fast guys, too fast for strong guys. In every single situation, he was dominant. There was maybe 3 or 4 center backs that had even a physical chance at keeping up with him. And it culminates, I think, that season culminates in, unfortunately, the 3-0 derby win they had against Milan. In that game, he scores 1, but he was unstoppable. I remember after I did a video because Alessio Romagnoli, our center back, was getting so much shit for how he defended him. And I remember doing a video back then, just still on my channel, but I was just like, I don't think there's anything Romagnoli could have done. There is not a solution for what he did. I genuinely believe that at that point, he reached a level of fit in the system and fit with his play style that was just it was unstoppable. It was unstoppable. When he put his back to you, that was it. He got 8 seconds. His hold-up game was so good. He got 8 seconds to decide what he wanted to do. And he always made the right decisions with that much time. And it culminates with the crescendo of his career. He's a Ballon d'Or nominee, Serie A Team of the Season, Serie A MVP, and most importantly, Italian champion. And then he opens his mouth. Conte leaves that summer, and Lukaku asks for a new contract at Inter. One that they're not in a financial position to give him. And then Chelsea come in for him, and they offer Inter 110 million euros, which they reject. Then he goes in to newly appointed Simone Inzaghi's office, and he says, and I quote, "I didn't want to ruin the atmosphere because I was no longer with my head in Milan." Keep an eye on that one. Keep that quote in mind. So I asked him, please find an agreement. So they did. 110 million is not an easy amount to refuse. So when he expressed intent to want to leave, they let him go. He goes back to Chelsea. Let's put his Chelsea move in context. He is Chelsea's answer to Salah with Liverpool and De Bruyne with City. They're signing him to be the figurehead, the next step in the club's progression. He comes in and his debut against Arsenal, he's absolutely dominant. And I know people will say, oh, it's Pablo Mari. It was dominant. It was everything you saw at Inter. It was impeccable hold-up. It was link-up play. It was physicality, the like of which even the Premier League wasn't ready to deal with. He was spectacular. It's now been a little bit forgotten because of how it went, but he was spectacular to start. Okay? And 2 games later, he scores a brace against Aston Villa in a 3-0 win. And then that same week, he scores in a 1-0 win against Zenit St. Petersburg in their first Champions League game. He's off to an incredible start. A few games later, he gets injured against Malmo. He misses 6 games. Chelsea win 5 of them, draw 1. Right? When he comes back, again, look at the context. The context is he was gone for 6 games. Chelsea did exceptionally well. Right? Tuchel brings him off the bench for the next 4 games. Right? Then he gets COVID, misses another 3 games. Then he finally comes back. He's done with COVID, done with his injury. He's back. He comes off the bench against Aston Villa again. And in a 1-1 game, he scores the winner and he wins a penalty. And I just want, this is the time I'm going to interrupt myself. I just want you guys to hear the commentary on him winning this penalty.
Brilliant, Lukaku. Too strong for target. He's passed on, but that's a penalty. Brilliant. It's game over. Brilliant, Lukaku. That's what he's bought in for. There's your £90 million man right there.
Keep the commentator's enthusiasm, the commentator's adulation. Keep that in mind for a second, okay? 3 days later, they play Brighton. He starts. He scores. This is December 29th. Okay? December 29th. 1 day later, Sky Sports interview comes out. Sky Italia. He says, and I quote, "I'm not happy with the situation at Chelsea. Tuchel has chosen to play with another system. I won't give up. I'll be professional," apparently. Now, he says the word now. Of all the times, he says now. It's the right time to share my feelings. I have always said that I have Inter in my head. Bear in mind. It's so funny that he used the same one. Bear in mind, 6 months earlier, he said, my head was no longer in Milan. I have always said that I have my head in Inter. I have Inter in my head. I know I will return to Inter. I really hope so. 6 months after becoming the club record signing. 1 day after scoring against Brighton. 4 days after scoring and winning a penalty against Aston Villa. And that commentator's adulation. And that commentator's excitement. And him saying, this is the striker. This is why you buy these guys. This is why you spend all that money. 4 days after that game, 4 days after that commentary, 4 days after the fans, the commentators, everybody is in love with him, he comes with this quote. And the kicker, the cherry on top of the sundae of crap that is this interview, is that it was recorded 3 weeks earlier. What was 3 weeks earlier, you say? 3 weeks earlier was the period in which he came off the bench for 4 straight games. This dude threw a temper tantrum, called an interview, said, I'm gonna shit on every single thing at this club. Because 4 games following his injury, in which that time Chelsea did well without him, for 4 games, all he had to do was be patient for 4 games. He threw a temper tantrum and threw that fucking interview. And that was it. That was the end. 6 months. 6 months into his Chelsea career. He was excluded from the matchday squad 1 time, and he played a little bit after that, and he scored a few times after that. But that was it. That interview was the effective end of his time at Chelsea. And when you put it all together, the context and the dates and the reality of what happened, I'm not even a fucking Chelsea fan. I usually get accused of hating Chelsea. And even when I read all this shit, and I looked at the dates, and I looked at the times, and I looked at when he was scoring, even I was pissed. Even I was like, holy fucking shit. He was doing well. He was fine. It was gonna work out. All he had to do was shut his mouth. Genuinely, all he had to do was shut his mouth. If he hated Tuchel's system so much, he would have outlasted him. He was the club record signing. All he had to do was shut up. And at the end of the season, you know what happens. He goes back to Inter. On loan this time. He goes back to Inter on loan. But the damage to his career has already been done. He scores in his debut. And then he has a few injuries. Okay? A few injuries because, again, for the second time running, when he is unhappy, his physique declines. Inter's director Marotta said he has 103 kilos to carry. So he needs to be in perfect physical shape to deliver, and he's not there yet. He said this because it took him until he had 3 goals until match week 31. 30 full games were played. He had 3 goals in that period. He had 3 league goals in that period. Which is going to make what I'm about to say even crazier. Because afterwards, Inter are at match week 31 is the line of demarcation for his season. He's had an abysmal season. He's been a waste of money. Even though it was just a loan, he's been a waste of wages at that point. Match week 31 is the line of demarcation. He starts a run. In the last 8 league games, he has 11 goals and assists. He's absolutely dominant. Inter at the time, in match week 31, were 5th, with by far the hardest schedule of the top 4 race, with 3 or 4 teams competing for those spots. And he propelled them to a comfortable 3rd, and wins against Lazio, Roma, and Atalanta. Okay? He was big time in the stretch to end the season. He was big time in their path, coming off the bench, in their path to getting the Champions League. In that run-in, in that 2 months at the end of the season, he bought back all the good faith of the Inter fans. All the good faith of the Inter fans was bought back. They wanted him. They wanted him back. They wanted him at the club. They were ready. During that run, another key incident happens. In the Coppa Italia semi-final against Juventus, unfortunately not for the first time in his career in Italy, he's subject to racist abuse from the Juve fans, right? He scores the winning penalty in that game. He shushes them. And then, by the grace of fucking Italian refereeing, he gets booked and sent off, right? So keep that incident in mind. A huge incident that caused such huge buzz. Thankfully, his red card was at least rescinded. But a huge incident that caused a lot of commotion between those 2 clubs. 2 clubs who already have a huge rivalry. Now moving on, we fast forward to the Champions League final. Champions League final, which he doesn't start because he hadn't started the semi-final, either of the legs in the semi-final. He comes off the bench. He's their secret weapon. And again, remember when we talked about how this dude might be cursed? How he's just always there for the clumsy moment. Unfortunately, it wasn't so clumsy, but it was Champions League defining misses. He had the miss he ends up having against Ederson. I mean, the most point blank range shot you'll ever see. He stuffs it in Ederson's foot. And I think that's such an important moment in this story because despite that moment, despite the fact that he very, very practically cost Inter a shot at the Champions League, right? Despite that, everyone wanted him back. Most Inter fans that I followed, most Inter fans that I've seen, everybody wanted him back. Everybody wanted him to join permanently from Chelsea. And Inter get in the room and they negotiate with Chelsea. And it's a tough negotiation because Inter don't have that much money. They offer 30 million, that gets rejected. Then they raise it to a finalized, what they say is finalized, 35 million offer, right? That's as high as they're willing to go. And Lukaku doesn't fucking return the calls. He doesn't give them the confirmation that he wants to join. He doesn't give them the confirmation that he wants to join. And Juve put in a 40 million bid that's contingent on them selling Dusan Vlahovic, right? Inter, when they hear this, that he's agreed personal terms with Juve, they just leave the negotiations altogether. The one goddamn club that in the prime of his career actually embraced him, that in the prime of his career he actually had success in, that in the prime of his career he snaked and then came back and the fans in the club still accepted him, still wanted him back. And a few weeks later, we're finding out from Lautaro Martinez, his teammate is saying, "Oh, I was disappointed by Romelu. It's the truth. I tried to call him in those days of chaos, but he never answered me. The same he did with my other teammates." Like, are you fucking serious? Ghosting teammates? He didn't even have the dignity to fucking pick up the phone, say what was going on. It's one thing wanting to go to Juve. That's messed up enough. After the racism incident, especially, the rivalry between the two clubs on a much lower level, obviously, right? But you combine those two factors. I mean, I can't fucking think of any more factors that to make you not want to join a club, right? That's one thing. But to not even have the dignity to explain it to your teammates, the guys that you fought with side by side every single game for 3 seasons, that's just unbelievable. And I don't know what the hell's going to happen in his career now. I don't. Now there's talks that Inter and Juve might have a Vlahovic Juve and Chelsea might have a Vlahovic-Lukaku swap. And I don't know. I don't know what happens to his career, but regardless of what happens to his career, in my opinion, he's just never going to reach the heights that he once reached, and he's never going to be loved the way Inter fans loved him. And it's sad, because that in another way is partly wasted talent. That is another way of wasted talent. A talent that incredible. A player that phenomenal. All he had to do was make like one good decision out of every 5. All he had to do, because he was so talented, he had so much ability. All he had to do was just make one decision good out of every 5, and he couldn't even fucking do that. That's what's so disappointing. He'll just always be remembered to me as the most confusing, frustrating player ever, in my opinion.